Part 4. The God-awful chart. For a few seconds, none of them moved. The corridor where Kade's tiny bathroom should have been stretched impossibly far, washed in the sickly fluorescence he remembered from St. Elizabeth at the end of it. The isolation room door waited, cracked open like a mouth about to speak. Marcus swore under his breath. "This building isn't up to code," he said weakly, but his voice shook. "That hallway wasn't there a second ago. You see it?" Kade whispered. Navarro didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the corridor, pupils blown wide. Her calm had fractured. Kade watched her fingers curl unconsciously as if trying to hold on to something that wasn't there. "Kade," she said finally without looking at him, "what exactly have you been seeing?" The inner voice snorted. "Now she asks." "The stain," he said, "the ceiling, your face, the voices through the vents. I thought it was all in my head in the hospital wing," she asked. "That too," he said, "except you're standing in it." The monitors beeped louder in his ears, no longer imagined but laid, one fast, one slow, one flat. The sound vibrated in his teeth, his skin prickled, every hair lifting. Navarro took a step toward the corridor. "Don't," Marcus hissed, grabbing her sleeve. "Whatever that is, we're not equipped." She shook him off without taking her eyes off the hallway. "If it's in his head, I should be able to disrupt it," she said, more to herself than to him. "If it's not, we need to know." "You don't walk into someone's psychosis," Marcus snapped. "That's not how this works." Navarro finally looked at him. There was something wild in her expression that Kade had never seen in the hospital, something stripped of professional distance. "Apparently," she said, "none of this is how it works." Her gaze flicked back to Kade. "Stay here," she said. "You stay here," the inner voice snapped back. Let her walk into it. Let her meet herself on the other side. Navarro stepped over the threshold. The change was immediate. The corridor brightened around her, flattening into the sterile, overlit palette of the ward. The tiles under her shoes gleamed, waxed recently. The air thickened with that familiar chemical chill. Her housing authority uniform blurred and then solidified into a white coat, ID badge clipped neatly to the pocket. Kade watched it all happen from the doorway of his crappy apartment, which now opened straight into the hospital he'd sworn he'd left. Marcus swayed beside him, one hand braced on the peeling door jamb, knuckles white. Navarro's shoulders straightened as if some invisible weight had settled back on them. "Okay," she murmured. "Okay, I know this place." She walked down the corridor toward the isolation room. Each step echoed twice, once in the tiled hall, once in the wooden plaster skeleton of Kade's building. To him, her figure wavered. At one moment a doctor in a hospital, at the next a social worker in a dingy apartment hallway, phasing between two realities like a misfiring video feed. "Is she glitching?" Marcus whispered. "You're the only one who thought she was solid." The inner voice said, "You never wondered why your therapist lived in your head rent-free." They reached the point where corridor and apartment bled into each other completely. The cracked frame of Kade's bathroom door fused with the heavy metal of the isolation room door, hinges overlapping in ways that didn't obey geometry. The shard of mirror still clinging to the top corner reflected both versions of Navarro at once. She stopped in front of the room. The door's window was dark. "Intake room 7, she said softly. "Mercer," Kade admitted after. She trailed off. "After what?" Marcus asked hoarsely. Navarro didn't answer. Her hand reached for the door handle. The inner voice for the first time sounded unsure. "If she opens that," it said, "you're gonna see something you can't unsee." Kade's throat was dry enough to crack. "I already have," he whispered to himself. Navarro opened the door. The room inside was small, smaller than it had ever felt when he was strapped to the bed in the center of it. The walls were padded in bland, off-white panels. The overhead light flickered. A heart monitor sat dormant in the corner, leads coiled neatly on top. And on the bed lay a man. He was thinner than Kade remembered being at his worst, gray hospital gown hanging from his frame, wrists marked by deep, permanent grooves where restraints had dug in repeatedly over time. His hair was close-cropped, his face slack. Kade stepped forward despite himself. The man's face came into focus. It was Marcus. Marcus, but not Marcus. Cheeks hollowed, eyes sunken into bruised sockets, mouth slack with the kind of exhaustion that doesn't leave room for hope. A hospital ID band hugged his wrist. "Mercer. Kade, EOB, 70, long-term care."